China didn't just fight with the harsh environments of the desert, it actually started reshaping it. Something unbelievable is happening that sounds impossible, but it's real. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more breakdowns of incredible innovations. The desert that would not forgive. One of the most brutal environments on Earth lies in northern China. The Taklamakan Desert is also one of the largest sand-shifting deserts in the world, as it covers more than 337,000 square kilometers. It behaves like an enemy to China because the dunes move without warning and will swallow roads, farms, and entire settlements on the way. The winds flowing in this area can carry dust over thousands of kilometers while darkening the skies over major cities, with people choking. This was not just an environmental problem, but it was actually more of an economic threat, a health crisis, and a national security risk. Sandstorms erupting from this region would disrupt transportation and damage modern infrastructure while forcing cities like Beijing into emergency states again and again. By the late 20th century, desertification started expanding at an alarming speed, consuming fertile land and pushing ecosystems toward collapse. Taklamakan received an average of less than 100 millimeters of rainfall per year. Summer temperatures in this region soar beyond 40 degrees Celsius, and winters go far below freezing point. This offers almost nothing for plants to cling to while they're stunted growth. When vegetation stops, the sand starts taking over entirely while creating a feedback loop of destruction that is almost impossible to stop. According to most of the history, dangerous deserts like this were considered unbearable and unbeatable because you can't reclaim them and you just have to avoid them. But China chose a different path here, declaring war on sand. By the 1970s, China realized that the desert was not just expanding, but it was actually accelerating faster than anyone expected. The natural land defenses were being stripped off by deforestation, overgrazing, and aggressive groundwater extraction. Winds grew stronger as the soil lost its structure, and sandstorms became more frequent and more violent with each passing time. The Great Wall of China is famous in the entire world, but in 1978, the government launched one of the most ambitious ecological experiments ever attempted in the history of China. This 3 North Shelter Belt program was so massive that the world would later call it the Green Great Wall. This wasn't just a single line of trees like any other ordinary green program, but it was a whole living system. This included a massive network of forests, windbreaks, shrubs, grasslands, and water infrastructure that stretches over 4,500 kilometers across the entire North China. The goal of this project was considered quite bold by analysts. It was designed to halt desertification, protect farmland, reduce sandstorms, and eventually reclaim land that was once thought to be permanently lost. At that time, many experts were skeptical about it because planting trees in a desert sounds naive, but the Chinese government was determined to win this war. Critics continued arguing that without rain, this project will not be a success as nothing will be able to survive. But China was not relying only on hope. It was actually relying heavily on engineering, data, and scale. Mapping the enemy from space. To start, and to eventually win this war, Chinese engineers needed to study the desert in detail before even a single seed could be planted. Drones constantly monitored dune movements to find patterns. Soil scientists were analyzing moisture levels and mineral content. This was not any random planting of seeds in the hope of some miracle, but this was a calculated intervention in the process of desertification. What scientists discovered during these studies was a little different than what was expected. They found out that stopping the sand does not require turning the desert into a rainforest, but it only requires some stability. In other words, if the sand could be anchored, even temporarily, the life in this region would begin to return. That insight was enough to lead to one of the simplest yet most effective technologies ever created to beat the desert. The straw checkerboard that changed everything. Parts of the Taklamakan Desert now look like a giant chessboard from the sky view because perfect squares have been etched into the dunes while stretching endlessly towards the horizon. On the ground, these structures look deceptively simple, like a straw. Workers had to work days and nights to dig shallow trenches so that bundles of straw could be laid in precise grid patterns. These straws are usually around series by 6 meters in size. These straw checkboards are placed there for 3 main purposes. They slow the wind at ground level, trap moving sand, and they also create a small microenvironment where moisture can survive just long enough for plants to make roots and start growing. Building these grids was brutal work because there were no paved roads in that desert, and trucks sank into soft sand several times. The temperature regularly exceeded 45 degrees and the environment was too harsh to work in, as shade was almost non-existent there. Still, millions of straws have been transported deep into the desert, and they are also laid by the hands of the workers. The genius of this program lies in what will happen after this step. As the straws weather, they slowly decompose while adding organic material into the sand that is otherwise sterile. The surface of the desert will cool down and the evaporation will drop to low levels. The dunes will stop moving due to trapped sand, and only then will the planting begin. Choosing plants that refuse to die. Scientists knew that trying to grow lush forests in this dead sand soil overnight is just a foolish thing to do, so they selected species that have evolved for extreme conditions. Shrubs like red willow, saxaul, and desert poplar were chosen for their deep root systems and high drought tolerance. Planting is done with top-level precision to avoid any mistakes that can hinder plant growth. Mechanical drills were used to create small holes at the center of each straw grid so that seedlings could be carefully placed and their roots could sit just below the hottest surface layer. Only a measured amount of water was added, which was never more than necessary. As roots grew, they locked sand in place, and as plants matured, they reduced wind speed even further. Over time, individual grids started merging into continuous belts of vegetation. This is how China started removing sand, and it was not by hauling it away, but it actually was by immobilizing it. And this was only the first phase of this project. If you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more shocking mega projects videos like these. Turning sunlight into water. China realized that the solution to one problem could solve the other, because deserts don't lack energy, they just lack water. The Taklamakan receives over 2,700 hours of intense sunlight each year. Instead of fighting it, engineers decided to harness it. Massive solar arrays were installed along the critical corridors like the Tarum Desert Highway to power groundwater pumps. These solar-powered pumping stations draw water from depths that exceed 100 meters, and that water flows through underground pipelines and drip irrigation systems for delivering moisture directly to plant roots. This system also reduces waste to almost none. More than 200,000 trees can now survive along this highway alone, which are sustained completely by renewable energy. The road itself has become the world's first carbon-neutral desert highway that is powered by the same sun that once scorched everything in its path. Something unexpected happened under the solar panels, as layers of the ecosystem are now being created where nothing existed before. The shade of the panels lowered the soil temperature, which reduced evaporation, and moisture started lingering around for longer. Plants like licorice and hawthorn began growing naturally beneath those panels. When solar power becomes infrastructure. Solar panels didn't just help with powering pumps, but they actually reshaped the landscape. Panels elevated several meters above the ground to allow air circulation and vegetation growth beneath them. This dual-use design made energy production and land restoration happen at the same time. In some regions, concentrated solar power towers were added for generating electricity during the day and night, as well as to ensure a stable power supply even after sunset. Thousands of mirrors are used to track the sun while reflecting light onto a central tower where molten salt is heated to an extreme temperature. The stored heat in this tower is used in the production of electricity. Survival rates improved drastically as the energy storage was meant for irrigation systems to operate continuously, and trees no longer had to depend on inconsistent water schedules. Deserts became power hubs as compared to energy wastelands as they were before this project. Building a highway through the impossible. China needed access to keep supporting restoration, and that meant roads through the shifting sand that actively tries to erase everything. The Tarum Desert Highway cuts straight through the heart of the Taklamakan and is over 300 kilometers long. It was built in the 1990s and it required new engineering methods at that time. A layer of gravel was laid under the asphalt as a strong foundation to hold it. Furthermore, geotextiles and straw mats were designed to prevent dunes from taking over this road. Along both sides, slate belts of trees and shrubs are planted in this green project, which was maintained by using solar-powered irrigation. These green corridors act as living barriers between sand and the roadway. What was once one of the most inaccessible regions on Earth is now connected by a fully functioning transportation artery that supports research, renewable energy, and local economies. The desert becomes an open-air laboratory. Scientists noticed some secondary effects as vegetation was spreading. It was seen that wildlife was returning as soil microbes reappeared and carbon absorption increased. Sandstorm frequency also dropped sharply due to these positive changes. In some regions, dusty days fell by more than 70% compared to what was seen in the 1980s. The land started supporting agriculture, orchards, and grazing, while it was totally barren before this ecological project. All of this was happening at a small but meaningful scale. According to some estimates, China has recovered over 30 million hectares of degraded land nationwide. Forest coverage rose from around 10% in 1949 to over 25% today. The desert didn't disappear, but it changed its behavior, and all of this was possible due to China's green project. Are there limits to the green miracle? Despite the undeniable success that has been seen by this green project, it isn't happening without any controversies. Some ecologists are giving warnings that large-scale monoculture planting is actually creating fragile systems where fast-growing plants like poplar are consuming a significant amount of groundwater, while they are also susceptible to diseases. A massive number of planted trees were wiped out by the outbreaks in the past, and years of progress were wasted. Other studies also suggest that in some regions, desertification has been slowed, but it hasn't been fully reversed yet. Critics are still arguing that true sustainability requires more diversity, like native grasses, shrubs, and mixed woodlands rather than uniform tree belts. Considering all these aspects, China has begun adjusting strategies while shifting focus from tree counts to ecosystem health. The lesson here is clear that green alone is not enough in this war, and balance also matters. China didn't just plant trees. It has actually re-engineered an ecosystem by using data, scale, and most importantly, patience. From straw grids to solar power, that desert has learned to stand still and also to breathe. If you like this video, then do subscribe to our channel for more stories where science reshapes the impossible into possible.